Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a sports nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach at Strength Guild. I'm a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and all-around amazing fella.
This is Dr. Mike G. Nelson. I'm the owner of Extreme Human Performance. I teach for Rocky Mountain University and creator of the Flex Diet certification.
My name is Ben Clark. I am the inventor and owner of BC Products, which is the automatic wrap roller.
Okay. Everyone, we're going to do a little bit of mail and news, as we are wont to do, and then we're going to talk with Ben about launching fitness-related products, commercializing things, that sort of thing. Have you ever wondered, you had an idea about something in the gym maybe, or a nutritional product that's sort of a different ball of wax, but we'll talk about some of, the pathways and, the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. Okay, but let's start with some news.
Strength and muscle sport news.
Okay, this is from listener Nicholas, and he has a little bit of confusion, and I don't blame him, about something in the literature. So he says, "Hi, Dr. Lowery, Phil, Dr. Nelson, and Iron Brethren. I'm a grad student in physiology that runs an educational YouTube channel." He says, "I've run across a paper I was hoping you guys could help me understand, because it has baffled me and I've exhausted my professors with incessant questions." Haha.
Uh-oh.
The paper is on metabolic acidosis and redefines the understanding of lactic acid being a driving force in hydrogen accumulation. And listeners, if you're not familiar, hydrogen ions or protons, think acid. When you hear that in muscle physiology, just think acid. And he says accumulation of such when completing multiple repetitions. So he's saying the textbooks and many papers, etc., talk about essentially lactate being the bad guy. And if you notice, I'm trying to say lactate, not lactic acid. We try not to say lactic acid anymore because it makes it sound like a bad guy. But in any case, and he talks about lactic acid being sort of a driving molecule behind the pain that we feel during high-rep exercise. And he says, I'm not talking about delayed onset muscle soreness. So, he understands that, right? And some coaches still think lactate is the reason for next day or delayed muscle soreness. And, of course, that's just preposterous. But in any case, he says he came across a paper by Rob Robergs. And I know Rob, not well, but I'm acquainted with him. When he was at the University of New Mexico. Now he's in Australia, and I know Mike has spoken with him. And Dr. Robergs argues that the accumulation of hydrogen ions, in other words, muscle acidity, is from the hydrolysis of ATP during muscle contraction, and that lactate actually helps take up hydrogens and help buffer this increased acidosis. This is completely contradictory to my previous understanding. I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether this is the case or not. And then he wraps up, as with all your listeners, I find your podcast to be just stellar with a beautiful mix of applied coaching, physiology, mechanistic understandings. I wish you all continued success. I thank you for your time and hope to contribute to your podcast when I'm able, because I believe in the consistent great work that you guys do. Happy lifting. So thanks, Nicholas. That's cool. I'll start off with this. Rob Robergs is right. And a little behind the scenes, he actually had some difficulty, despite being brilliant and frankly correct, in getting some of his early work published. The way I teach it in the classroom, the best analogy I can think of is that lactate is an innocent bystander at the scene of the crime, right? So lactate, if you look at the molecule, Nicholas, it's just pyruvate. So you run glycolysis hard and fast, right? You break a 6-carbon glucose into 2 3-carbon pyruvates. And if you acidify those pyruvates, that's lactate. If you look closely, there's just little H's stuck to it. It's acidified pyruvate, and they call pyruvate the crossroads of metabolism for lots of reasons, and this is one of them because it can actually carry those H's, those little hydrogen ions, out of the intensely working muscle. So you could do things like recycle it back to your liver for gluconeogenesis, make some blood sugar out of it. So I know some listeners are already bored to tears, but that's the best way that I can say that. Lactate is an innocent bystander at the scene of the crime, so much so, and I know, Mike Nelson, you talk about this, that even George Brooks, sort of a founding father of our field, he talks about actually supplementing with lactate. It could be a benefit, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so very similar. How I explain it in the oversimplified version is basically the same, right? So if you run anaerobic metabolism super hard, you're going to spin off lactate plus hydrogen ions, right? Which is, quote, lactic acid. It's exactly what you said. The hydrogen ions are the acid. They bugger up possibly muscle contraction, all sorts of other stuff. The lactate by itself is actually a really good fuel. Like pretty much all the muscle can pull it up. Cardiac tissue prefers it. There's some evidence the brain may even actually prefer it, that maybe we're making lactate to spin it off and send it to the brain possibly. But yeah, lactate's actually a really good fuel. It just so happens that they both, in general, get produced at the same time. So they both get kind of branded as, ooh, these are negative things.
Right. And it is logical, right? You can do a simple finger prick with a lactate meter and be like, oh, at the very moment, or maybe a minute or two lag, after I do this 30-rep set of leg extensions or a Wingate test on a bike sprint, you know, oh, God, look, my lactate is sky high at the same time that I've got this horrible burning sensation. But again, it's not causal. It's just, it's actually carrying away some of that acid. And you know what? You make a good point, Mike. You might think, well, why do we care about muscle acidity? Well, aside for some possible effects on muscle catabolism, like in a chronic way, this is more of an acute thing. It shuts you right down, right? So some of the controlling enzymes and glycolysis that allows you to do that high repetition set kind of thing, you can have the discipline of a Green Beret, and you will still chemically shut down because of the allosteric modification of PFK. There's a lot of things that go on here, but yeah, that acid, like you said, really buggers up the system, and it will slow you right down. And that's a protective mechanism in a sense, right? Because you can't have a muscle become so acidic that it starts to denature itself. So,
yeah, I remember Stu Phillips saying that once when he was doing some of the leg extension studies for high reps. He would have guys that would come in the lab and be like, oh, 20 or 30 leg extensions, that's so easy. And he's like, they get to about like rep 20 and they're turning all sorts of different shades and colors. And he's like, yep, at some point, muscle just shuts down.
Right on. So there you go. And I will say this, Nicholas, you will see in some newer textbooks, and hopefully the more progressive professors are in fact rephrasing how they're describing lactate. They really should be. So it's hard to go to conferences and whatnot or look at some of the newer, better textbooks and not know that. But now, let me relate this to something that our listeners might like a little bit better. Not that that's bad. I mean, let's face it. It's a fundamental question. Why can't I lift continuously forever, right? And so the acidity thing is one of the reasons that you fatigue. Okay. So that brings me to a couple of papers that I have about buffering muscle acid. So let's say you like those high repetition sets that guys like, Stu Phillips are pointing out. They can actually be quite protein synthetic, quite anabolic. You do these high rep sets. But here's one. We often talk about things that work. I feel like we have to have some balance. Here's a paper that beta-alanine, which is a precursor to carnosine, which is a muscle acidity buffer, does not actually quote unquote work. This is from Med-Sci Sports Exercise, October of this year. I mean, it just happened, from Beck, B-E-C-H, and colleagues, European paper. It says, no effect of beta-alanine on muscle function and kayak performance. They took elite kayak rowers, 10 males and 7 females, supplemented them with 80 milligrams per kg of their body weight of beta-alanine for 8 weeks, and then they looked at muscular fatigue and EMG, so muscle activation, if you will. Additionally, performance was evaluated as a 1,000 meter and a 5 by 250 meter kayak ergometer rowing test. So it says there was no detectable difference of beta-alanine on the 1,000-meter kayak ergometer performance. Mean power output was reduced to a similar extent in the 5x5 test. In other words, everybody fatigued from their first bout, right, to their fifth. There was a 23 down to 22% fatigue if you look across these bouts in the beta-alanine, and there was a 26 down to 20% fatigue in the placebo. In other words, fatigue just really wasn't affected differently, right? There wasn't a sort of a divergence between the way they fatigued. Conclusion, 2-minute maximal voluntary contraction characteristics are unaffected by beta-alanine supplementation in elite kayakers, and likewise, both a 1,000-meter kayak ergometer time trial lasting 4 to 5 minutes, as well as 5 by 250-meter repeated sprints was unaltered by supplementation. So, doesn't always pan out. There could be body part issues. Who knows? Maybe the fact that they're very elite and they can already buffer acid reasonably well, or maybe, I don't know. So beta-alanine did not work in that particular paper. And then one more, just briefly. This is a fall 2017, so also recent paper from Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition, and Mike and I have both published in that, from Rogerson, Vegan Diets, Practical Advice for Athletes and Exercisers. Now, bear with me. I'm going somewhere with this, with the muscle acidity. It says, with the growth of social media as a platform to share info, veganism is becoming more visible and could be becoming more accepted in sports and the health and fitness industry. But he was essentially pointing out that vegans are at risk of insufficiency for several things: calories, protein, the adequacy of B12, iron, zinc, calcium, iodine, and vitamin D. Also, long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, and DHA, because they're just not in most plant sources. Now, he does point out that you can carefully plan a vegan diet to be an athlete, and we've talked about this on the show before, but he says it's also suggested that creatine and beta-alanine supplements might be considered with vegan athletes, owing to vegetarian diets promoting lower muscle creatine and lower muscle carnosine levels in consumers. So, and he goes on to say more empirical research is needed. But I think that's probably good advice. You are missing some of those zoochemicals that we were just talking about, I think, last week or the week before. And creatine and carnosine are at the top of the list. There are things in meats that are very helpful, in this case for muscle acid buffering. Okay, so that's sort of the whirlwind tour there of what happens in a high repetition set, or when you're working to up to a burning sensation. So, having said that, let's get to our guest. Thanks, Ben, for being patient.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess first, just how you got into the fitness industry at all, your own back to that, and then how that segues to creating products for it, maybe in general.
Yeah, well, how I got in the fitness industry in general was just as a young guy, a teenager. I lived a quarter mile away from my school and elementary school, so I would, with my backpack full of my homework and stuff, try to beat the bus. Actually, we were the first stop home, so that quarter mile, I would just try to run and sprint and beat the bus to my house. And so I was running every day, all the time, past this really small gym. You could probably fit it in most of living rooms. And this guy saw me just kind of constantly running, and one day stopped me, asked me, how old I was. And at the time I was like 13, 14. And he said if I got my mom to sign the waiver in the papers, that he would allow me to sweep up the gym and clean up the circuit. He had only machines in it, and do the circuit of machines, and he'd walk me through and show me. And so that's kind of how I got started with it. Was around 13, 14, just doing circuit machines for probably about a good year. I had no idea about free weights, but started buying the magazines and started looking at things. And the gentleman who owned this small gym, he basically just said he doesn't have time to train me, but look at the magazines, the Muscle Fitness, the Flex, you know, and things like that. And don't pay attention to how big those guys are, because obviously they've been doing it for a long time and everything. But pay attention to the exercises. Read. You know, he said, you know, read. Pay attention to the tips and the techniques and the way their hands are and what they say about the way their wrists are, and, you know, when they're doing different things like that. So it was like self-education from the very start for me. And that's kind of the way I got started. After this gentleman started getting free weights in the basement of this small building, I started free weight lifting and was mostly benching and arms, because I didn't know anything else. I didn't know much about legs or anything. And, you know, fast forward 5-6 years in high school and everything, getting out of high school, by then, you know, started going to other gyms that had, you know, more weights, knowledgeable stuff, and I had done a ton of reading, bought books, bought the magazines. I still have boxes full of magazines, probably from when I was in high school, and I'm 33 now, that I just read, and that was the biggest thing for me, was just to read. You know, it's probably one of the best things that gentleman could have done, was told me that he doesn't have the time to teach me, but to just read, because, you know, if he would have been pointing out everything for me to do, I wouldn't have been able to read and understand that, and then I wouldn't have fallen also into the nutritional side of it, to understand that, oh, you know, eating all the junk food and all that stuff that, you know, I was doing out with my friends wasn't really going to be benefiting me in the gym. It was just going to be, you know, actually slowing me down. So basically throughout high school and everything, just read the magazines, weightlifted. I was an athlete in high school as well, played sports, you know, ran track, soccer, basketball, baseball, everything like that. And then after high school, it just kind of, you know, kind of stuck. I really got that bug, that iron bug, I guess you could say, to where it was just I needed to be in the gym. I needed to have a routine. It was part of kind of becoming who I was. And so for like 2 or 3 years, it was just consistently going to the same gym. And eventually they asked me to become a personal trainer there. So I got like a local certification, became a personal trainer for a few years, training folks. I was, you know, just encouraged to see people meet their goals, lose weight. I had, you know, a lot of some clients that weren't strictly weightlifters, but like, you know, possibly I had a couple that were doctors and lawyers that they just wanted to get in better shape so they could represent themselves better and their companies and themselves. And that was just really cool, seeing them set a goal and myself helping them get to that goal. As young as I was, being in my early 20s, 2021. And then after that, basically just kept lifting. Eventually left that about 2006, 2007, after a few years, when the bubble kind of burst. People quit kind of spending the extra money on trainers. And so clientele slowly dipped in the gym I was at, and actually membership slowly dipped. So I ended up just kind of getting out of it, but I kept lifting myself. And that led me to a gym out in Montgomery, Illinois, called Jacked Hardcore Gym. That's kind of my home powerlifting gym. I ended up going there back in 2007, 2008, and started lifting there. The owner, his name's Byron Hicks, he asked me, you know, have I ever powerlifted before? Not really. Some of the stuff I paid attention to is more Franco Columbo's exercises and the way he trained. I know he trained a lot like Arnold, but I started getting his books, finding his books wherever I could, Franco Columbo's book, or Dr. Franco Columbo, and, you know, really studying him, because I'm 5'5", he was 5'5", and I just felt like, okay, you know, maybe the exercises he did, you know, and the rep ranges benefited him more because of his body structure, and him and I had similar body structures. So I started following that and reading his books, and so I started deadlifting a lot, because Franco was really known for deadlifting. And Byron just asked, he says, hey, you know, do you want to go and do a meet? And I was like, what's that? You know, what's powerlifting? What's that? And this is going back, again, like 8-9 years ago. And I went and did my first meet, which was a UPA meet over in Iowa, and that was a deadlift-only meet. And I pulled well there, and it just kind of got me into it. Got me the bug, and it was just like, oh, this is what this is. And I found out it's community. It's just a whole bunch of people coming together to encourage and push each other. And, you know, everybody's on a focus. And I was actually just at the UPA meet this last weekend, promoting the automatic wrap roller. And, you know, there was a couple of very, very new, fresh people. It was their first meet. And it was just awesome to see the community of powerlifting come around a couple of these athletes that had never been involved in powerlifting before. And people that have been in for years just came around and said, oh, yeah, we'll help you. We'll help you with this and that. And, you know, they would go on the platform and do their first squat or first deadlift or bench and then come back and get a little bit of coaching and then go out there for their second attempts. And just that little bit of coaching would improve their lifts. And that's at a meet. It's just awesome to see that within powerlifting. So over the last 8 years, I've competed probably 5 or 6 times, but most of it was just being involved. I just, you know, and the community that Byron and his wife Tammy have at Jack Gym, it's just an awesome community of people coming together and helping each other. I mean, there's a lot of that constructive criticism, but it never comes across as offensive. And that's what you need, I believe, in powerlifting and in bodybuilding and in anything, any fitness. You know, if you have people telling you what you want to hear, it's not fully going to benefit you all the time. You know, if your depth's not down there on the squat, if you're not pausing long enough on your bench, well, then that's going to affect you on the platform. And, you know, same thing, you know, Byron's a coach and he coaches a lot of bodybuilders. If, you know, he's not telling people the truth about the way they're looking, you know, and that's an awesome thing that I've appreciated about Byron. And even with developing this product I came up with, you know, that's basically me in the last 10 years. But for the product, the automatic wrap roller, back actually in April is when it was a thought and an idea. And I was at a meet with Byron and the Power Corps is what we call the powerlifting team. I was at a meet. I wasn't competing. I was just there to support the team. You know, anybody need anything and knees wrapped, anything like that. And I was standing back with Byron, and I looked over, and there was people rolling their knee wraps, you know, stepping on them, stretching them out with their feet. And they were doing that standing right next to a hand crank roller. And I was just kind of like, I looked at Byron and I said, why haven't we developed something for this yet? Why isn't this automatic? Why isn't this, you know, taken to the next level yet? I mean, you know, and he just said, oh, no one's really done that yet. I said, okay. And, you know, I started looking some things up, and there was a couple of guys that had taken some pretty big motors and pretty big devices and made knee wrap rollers out of them, but it wasn't a product that could be sellable. It was too bulky, it was too big and too heavy. And so I kind of started dwelling on it for a couple of months. So, you know, April, March, by May, I had kind of a really good base idea of what I wanted this to look like. Had scribbled, written, drawn stuff up. And I wouldn't say it became an obsession, but it definitely became something where I was driving down the road and was just thinking, I'm driving this vehicle that has all these bells and whistles, but as soon as I give the steering wheel a little tweak to the left or right, it goes that way. And it's like, if we can have all that into this, there's got to be something out there that supports the torque that you need to tighten up your knee wraps as tight as they will go. It takes all the tension out of them, and will be able to benefit your lifts.
All right, well, so good stuff. We're going to quickly just do a little public service announcement. We'll go to break. And then we're going to come back and we'll delve into this a little bit, like how you did your drawings, you know, how you moved toward commercializing the whole thing. Just quickly, we're in the middle of our fall funds drive, everyone. So I want to first give thanks. I mean, it's an appropriate weekend to do that. We've all been feasting, at least here in the U.S. So thank you to the following people: Alan, Vicky, Holly, Prasan, Ryan, and Merrick. You help us keep the lights on, and we notice, right? We notice that. So for people out there who, if you don't have a way to support Iron Radio financially, it's very helpful to leave an iTunes review or retweet something on Twitter, that sort of thing. So there are ways to help the Iron Brotherhood, if you will, that Nicholas, one of our mail-in questions, was talking about, the Iron Brotherhood. So that's how you do it. If you $4 a month for some people make a one-time donation at ironradio.org. And again, we don't usually talk about this year-round. There's a lot of public radio-esque podcasts out there, and they constantly beg for money. And we try not to do that because we're doing it during the fall. So even if you don't have the funds, like I said, iTunes reviews and whatnot, very, very helpful. So having said that, let's go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about being an entrepreneur and moving an idea toward a fitness product. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks.
I can't stop feeling. Some of us don't understand how lucky we are to be living in this land.
Hi listeners, this is Rob Fortress Fortney. I'm here to remind you that as the holiday season approaches and your thoughts turn to giving, we like you to keep Iron Radio in your thoughts.
Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 a month, you become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page.
Or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood.
Of course, not everyone can afford to be a supporting member or a significant one-time donor. But for those of you willing to pitch in, $4 per month or $50 just once, we're about to sweeten the deal. Become a supporting member or major donor between now and January, and a limited number of you will receive a gift worth over $20. And we will never forget our existing supporters. Simply email me via ironradio.org, and I'll send you a free seminar from Dr. Lowry on how to significantly and realistically boost your testosterone levels. Help your iron brothers and sisters who cannot pitch in but deserve better internet programming in our sports. And happy holidays.
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's Phil and Lonnie and Mike, and we have Ben Clark, and we're going to talk about essentially being a fitness product entrepreneur. A lot of times our field is about service, right? The fitness industry, where you're working with clients and that sort of thing. It's also fun to talk about various products, I think. So, having said that, Phil, I know you had some questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically I'd like to hear about just how you finished off what you were delving into there. I mean, a lot of with products, it's either making something totally new, or bettering something that's existing. And you were kind of verging on both there with a couple people had made their own things for the gyms and things like that. They were too picky. So I don't know, just finish that process of how you initially figured this thing out, and then we can go into the nuts and bolts of that's the hard part in and of itself, and then the amazingly hard part is getting the thing to actually sell. So,
yeah. So yeah, as like I said, back in April is when it was an idea, for me, and I had mentioned that to Byron at that meet, why aren't we doing this automatically? And it took me 2 months of just really thinking about it, and then it kind of became, well, what goes into it now? What is it about the powerlifting industry, about the meets, and about knee wraps that this would have to cater to the masses and not just to a one that goes in our home gym and it just sits there in the corner and it's just for us. And so some of the things I first started thinking about was mobility, and that was okay. Well, what's the benefits of the hand crank? It's mobile. You can clamp it onto anything. So my first thing was what do I clamp this to? So I actually just started kind of sort of putting this stuff together, just random things, either getting someone to weld it for me or bolting it together. And then I actually gutted one of my drills at home, and I used the trigger system on it to actually power it. And I took that first kind of mocked up kind of thing to Byron and to the gym and to a couple of the folks there, just like, hey, the athletes, hey guys, what do you guys think? And even it was so skeletal structure, it was so basic and so just not what it is now, they were thrilled. They thought it was awesome. I remember Byron was having to hold onto it onto the squat rack because there's so much torque put on pulling on it that it was ripping it off of the squat rack. So he had to actually go on the other side and hold onto it. But it started doing what the idea was to do, and that was to start rolling and taking all the tension out of the knee wrap.
Ben,
so
if I can interject, I love the idea of prototypes. I've been going through a lot of that stuff myself. I'm not going to bore anybody, but it is, you got to make that awkward first step. I think about like the old science cartoons I watched as a kid, like with Mrs. Frizzle, stumble forward, get messy, make mistakes. You got to have that entrepreneurial spirit and just bodge something together. Right, so you can get that prototype. You got to have something to refine from, right? So I thought that's really cool that you just had the balls to start whipping stuff together.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is you kind of gotta sit back and really realize, okay, I'm gonna make a ton of mistakes with this. I'm gonna have stuff that just falls apart. But you gotta realize it's not the final product. It's not the final thing. What is it in your head that, either you're kind of daydreaming about, or what is that final thought that's in your head? And it's like, okay, how do you get to that? And then you just start. That's the whole thing. That was the thing for me was like I said, it took me 2 months of just thinking about it. And then it was finally like, I just have to start. It just has to start getting out here in physical form. And I think that's one of the things about entrepreneurs is so many times people will sit back and dwell on ideas, but they don't start putting them into motion, no matter how out there they seem. Powerlifting and knee wraps has been around for a long time now, and here I am, and I'm sitting back going, well, we don't have this. I'm going to try to do it, and I've done it. And it was just taking that action and taking that step. And then it's also, surrounding yourselves with the people that are going to encourage you and support you with that. If there's certain people that are not going to support your dream and your idea right off the bat, don't even mention it to them, because that negativity is just going to creep into you. Only go to those that are going to encourage you. And like I said, give you that constructive criticism that you're not going to walk away feeling, like a grain of sand, but you're going to walk away going, okay, I can work on that and I can do that. And that was the support I got from those guys, from Jack Jim, from Byron, and from Tammy, and from just the Power Corps team. And then from my family itself too, is as it developed, my wife alone, she was always like, always thrilled when I would show her more new and developed stuff. And so going on from the one that was kind of sort of not mountable and everything like that, that's when I enlisted my brother, who was a welder and a blacksmith. And I went to him, and his name's Bob, and I just went to Bob. I said, hey, man, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is the motor I've got for it, and this is what I'm looking at doing. What's your thoughts? And he looked at it, and we started welding and grinding, and then tearing stuff apart and welding and grinding, and eventually it got to about a third generation. The product I have out is the fourth generation of the whole idea. So you're talking about like how it molds itself and develops. I mean, like I said, you got to be willing to scrap ideas and throw stuff aside, and you got to be willing to take stuff, what people say, and even if your idea is like, no, I wanted it to be that way, but somebody says, hey, do it this way, you got to kind of humble yourself and say, okay, well, let's try it that way also. Instead of saying, no, this is my idea, this is what I want to do, you got to be able to say, no, you know what, let's try that and see how well that actually works. That might work better than what's in my head right now. And a lot of that was with my brother. He was just do this, do that. And so it came to, like I said, the step before this one. And it was clampable. It clamped nice, solid, and tight. It had kind of like this breaker bar on it. So when you put torque on it, you could literally stretch your wraps out to where there's nothing left in them, and it'll roll it up. It'll continue to roll it up. And it was like, okay, there it is. And then that's when I pursued the kind of legal side of it, you want to say. I got a patent pending number on it, so that, now it was actually something that could be something. And that was back in June. So basically from the beginning of May to about the end of June-ish, about 2 months of just constantly, daily working on it. And that's the other thing, too, is, I guess if you want to say as an entrepreneur, is it's a daily work. There is no weekends anymore. You don't have a Saturday and a Sunday. You're trying to develop anything. You wake up and you go, okay, I got to do this on this and this project. I got to drive here and I got to talk to this person because, they are more knowledgeable than me. And it's just constantly stretching yourself and realizing that, I guess you could say, to somebody that's got a 9-to-5, and there's nothing wrong with a 9-to-5. But that when you have an idea, you can't really take a break from that idea. You can't really sit back and say, nah, you know what, I'm gonna forget about it for a few days, and then I'll go back to it. It's like, no, it's fresh. And if you've got traction and you've got the momentum going in your favor, you want to keep that momentum going. You want to keep pushing it, because it's just as soon as that momentum slows down, you start dwelling on things. Oh, this didn't work. That didn't work. Oh, man, and then the mishaps and that stuff can creep in and creep on you fast. And so as soon as you can turn that around with your idea, your passion, whatever it is that you're trying to do, to get it back, going back in the positive side of things, do it,
Hey, Ben, if I can ask then, you mentioned getting a patent pending. Was that expensive? How'd you do that? And, if it was kind of pricey, how do you keep the momentum going?
So basically, from the beginning of this, I knew that it was going to be a journey of finances along with it. And so I took a look at our finances, and I just said, okay, I'm going to allocate this amount of money. Now, my wife and I feel we've always been somewhat diligent with our finances, and we had some savings, and so we allocated a certain amount of money for that. Now, going with the patent pending, I wasn't sure, because I had never pursued that, and I didn't know anybody that. So all I did was just Googled patent attorneys or patent lawyers in my surrounding area, and I found 5. And then I just, kind of investigated each one, just read their bios, read who they were and what they're about, and then even read the reviews on them. And I took this one gentleman because he had the most reviews out of everybody, and he had the most positive reviews out of everybody. And I was like, awesome. So I just contacted him. I mean, it's basically set up an appointment, call him, ask him, so, I have this idea, and I have the physical form of it, at least the basic physical form of it. What do I do now? How do I get this to where it protects me and protects my product? And from there, he just set up a meeting, went and sat down with them, presented it to him. And at that point, he basically just said, yeah, I think you have something here. And, then it goes, a patent pending in my area, I think it was somewhere between like 1,800, a little over $2,000 is what I spent on it. Something like that. And so the thing I learned with the patent pending number is you can continue to develop your product while you have the patent pending number on it. So once you get the solid, solidified, patent on it, you can't change your product. It has to be, okay, the next generation 2.0, and then you you do something with that. So that's why, I mean, I learned a lot about the patent pending. That's why, for certain products, you might see a couple of patent pending numbers, kind of strung on it. And that's just because, well, yeah, they're still kind of forming it. And so I took, that attorney's advice, and he said, just go with the patent pending number because you're still in development parts of it. And so as soon as I got the patent pending number, and this was the nervous part, this was the part where it was like, okay, because I had to send him measurements and a little bit of drawings and have his team draw it up and what it does, descriptions, be very descriptive, and even in some stuff, be very kind of loose descriptive because, it covers a wide range. Like, so my product, you can plug it into the wall and you can also attach a battery to it. So it's mobile, just like a hand cranked at a meat. And that was part of it. And so I made sure that was in there so that I wasn't locked into just plugging it into the wall outlet. And I didn't make it where it's just running off of batteries. I made sure that in that it was specific and specified that it does both purposes. So that is with me now, both dual ways to power it.
Yeah, it's good advice to keep it broad. That's the same thing that the patent lawyer I'm working with, same thing, is keep it. It sounds ironic, but specific but broad. Like, it can't be so broad that it's useless, but it's got to be broad enough that you could take it in slightly different directions, and anything that comes along with this idea belongs to you, right?
Yep, absolutely, 100%. Like you said, it has to be specific but broad, and yeah, that took a few times of me rolling over things, typing things up, emails back and forth, and then he'd finally say, okay, yeah, we got it with this. It was just like, holy cow, man, I thought I had it on the first one, but then it was like, no, we got to say it this way. And so, it's definitely a time thing. And, this is the thing I was encouraged for people. If they have an idea and they're working on it, is learn that if it hasn't been out for like 5 or 10 years and you're the first one that's kind of coming up with it, most likely there might not be anybody else really doing it. So you don't have to rush it. You don't have to hurry it up out there, unless, and this is where I had to be protective, is I had to really sit back and say, okay, who do I let know I'm working on this before I even have the patent pending, so that protect myself from somebody running off that might have more outlets than I do, more accessible means than I do, or even more money than I do. So that individual could leverage more things than I could, and could basically steal the idea. And it was just like, I kept it to a tight-knit group of friends and folks at the gym. And that's one thing I can't say enough about the Power Corps team, was just their trust. Like, I went to them and just said, hey, could you guys not take pictures of this? Could you guys, not put anything on social media? And they held to that, which was awesome, because everything in the social media world is about, this happened, that happened, this celebrity, that. And you can just whip out your phone and take pictures. So for months, prior to me releasing it to the public, these guys were kind of the athletes I was testing it on, and they never took a picture, they never did anything. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And that's what I said, is keep that group of people around you that you trust and that aren't going to run off with it. And also with that is then, once you do get the patent pending number, I made sure that I communicated very well with the patent attorney lawyer that I'm good now. Now I can bring this to a meet. I can, I clarified it very clearly that I can now make it kind of public. I can let people know, hey, I have this. And he was like yes, 100%.
Like, talk about it on a podcast.
Yeah. Like talk about a podcast, or like when I met Phil, that was out in California at the Record Breakers meet, being able to travel with it and get it out there. And so after that point, it was just I took it, and I still had it in a single form. I took it. I started branching out to weld shops, machinist shops, a plastic forming company to be able to make the cover for it, and then even like a decal to get the decal on it. And all those things are, again, those next step things. Those next things that kind of go up. And the thing I've liked about it is, so far it's been within my community, and I like being able to use those businesses that are in my community, because then it supports them, and then it gives them something else, to a product that they can roll with and develop and help me develop. And so it's really one of those things that you really don't hear of made in America that often. And this is one thing that's purely made within the community of the Northern Illinois area. And I want to keep it that way. I don't really want to try to branch out like outside of the U.S. because my community of powerlifters and things like that. And so to make it any other way, I'd want to keep using the folks I'm using, because they've been with me the entire time. They've helped me develop it this far, and everything, and they've walked through this. So it's almost like part of it is part of them and part of their business now. And I'm very encouraged by that, because all of them have worked very diligently with me. And again, it's just constructive criticism, and it's just, hey, well, I don't think this is going to work that way. Can I try this? And it's like, yeah, go ahead, try it. And you come in and I didn't know anything about that, and then all of a sudden they're just like, yeah, this works this way much better, and you're like, holy cow, wow. And so it's definitely working with those within your community, because I think they're wanting to support you, so they end up trying to help you develop it to make it even better.
I've heard that described as lean startup, right? It's almost like focus groups, like you have, whether it's a taste test or a practice session with it, or you put it in people's hands and then you get feedback. What you said was very valuable. You get so passionate about something, you have to realize somebody else, it may not be working out the way you thought it would exactly. It doesn't matter, because you're still in the driver's seat. You've got the patent pending, but having that lean startup where you follow the leads, right? You follow the feedback that works, and what's popular or what's working. I think you got to set aside your preconceptions and ego and follow what's going to make it better, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you've definitely got to be able to set aside what you want. I mean, like I said, you can have it in your head, in your mind, and you bring it to somebody that is, full-time into welding or full-time into machining, and you go, this is how I want it. And they can go, well, in the realms of it, machining or welding or this and that doesn't work. That angle doesn't work. This taper, that just doesn't really happen when it's in a machine. And it's like, oh, okay. And then you have to kind of take their expertise, because that's what they're an expert in, and trust that they're not trying to sway you poorly, but that you develop a relationship with them that is like, okay, wow, yeah, I can, these guys are definitely trying to steer me down the right way. And then, like, yeah, it becomes and the other thing too is if it's something you're developing out of passion and out of an idea, and it's something you dreamt up, people can see that. People will just know it and like see you, and like, was it my dream and passion that, like, ever since a kid to be like, oh, I'm gonna make this, wrap roller? Not at all. It was my passion to be involved in fitness, to be involved in seeing people meet their goals and change their lives. And I mean, that's what powerlifting is. That's what, even CrossFit is. That's what bodybuilding is setting a goal and a mark that you're not sure you can make, and obtaining that mark and going beyond that mark. And it's just like, whoa, how did I get there? And then it's just all those around you that are encouraging you and helping you. So when this idea came, it was just like, yeah, you know what? I got the right community around me. I can try for this. And then it was just go for it. And basically, follow that passion. And then so basically up to speed is I got all the different areas that I needed to develop this and to make it a product, and then to be able to set it up on the bench and go down a line and build it, and then box it and send it. And it was like, oh, wow, and it started with that idea, and it started acting on that idea. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short. They say they want to be, do something, and they don't act. They don't start acting on it. And it's just like, it's scary. It's nerve-wracking, because there was a lot of sacrifice with it. I actually quit my full-time job. I've been the sole breadwinner for my family. My wife, who's amazing, she is in school full-time. She has 2 semesters or a semester and a half left. She said she would go back to work full-time so that I could pursue this, because she saw the passion and she saw it developing, and she just said, go for it. And it was like, okay. And so I was able to do that. And that is a huge leap, and it's a scary thing. But again, getting under a bar of 500 pounds, 600, 800, 700, whatever that is, that mark is, or benching, you're going to have that bar, you could have that bar come down on you. It's scary to obtain goals that you've never reached for. But if you can powerlift and get yourself ready for a powerlifting meet, you can take your idea and or bodybuilding, CrossFit, anything you're doing that's goal-oriented, and you're meeting those goals in the gym and or in other aspects of your life, you can take an idea and invent it and make it. It's just goal-oriented. It's waking up every day saying, this is what I'm going to do.
The part that I can't stress enough is the patent part. Because
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of people the last 5 years, and you see a lot of people, they throw all this passion in there, and they skip that part.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, it is usually not months before you see a copy. It is like weeks.
Yeah.
The people get the steps. You know, you've talked about all these prototypes and all these steps it took to get, even the one to get patent pending in place. Once you make that product and you let the people see it, I mean, it's sad, but I mean, someone takes that, they take it apart, they're able to skip all your initial steps.
Mm-hmm.
They've got something copied in no time. So if you have something like this, I mean, I push all the people I work with. It's like, okay, that's a good idea. If it's a good idea, it's like, okay, get something drawn up and take this to a lawyer now while we're working on prototypes. You know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that was the thing. I never knew that. I mean, I've never been involved in that, but like, and actually, I actually think it was Byron who actually initially said, "You're coming up with this idea. Make sure you get a patent on it." And it was just like, yeah, that's a good thing. It's a good idea. And he really was, obviously, like I say, he's not just powerlifting coach, bodybuilding coach. I mean, he really is encouraged and basically been, behind me, giving me those extra pushes that I've needed to get over those humps, those times of frustration and then, he said that, make sure you get the patent on it. And it was just like, at that time, I was like, oh, okay. And then as I looked into it, it was like, yeah, that's a good idea, with that. But, up to this point now, I've been traveling a lot, trying to get the product out there. And that's the, kind of the next thing with it, the developing and the getting the resources and getting all those things lined up to where then it can be assembled. Those are all part of the developing, but now it's getting it out there. And that is kind of what led me out to California, essentially to the Record Breakers meet, to meet Phil and to introduce it to the powerlifting community. That's kind of a story in itself a little bit. And that's basically, I've had my YouTube channel up for that, like mini commercial, whatever you want to call it, for about a month now. And I've had the Instagram up for about the same amount of time. And the website, the automaticraproller.com, has been up at the same time for about a month now. And I got a hold of Jesse Burdick on, he's the host and the promoter of the Records Breaker Meet, on Instagram. And I said, just, hey, check out my invention for, the knee wraps. And he said, yeah, just message me. So I messaged him, and he said, awesome. So I sent him one. Well, in the process, it got damaged in the shipping, and it still worked. He said, "Oh, it still works. It still functions. It's still good. I could just kind of tape it up, and the cover of it's a little banged up." And I just said, "No, no, I got to come out there because that's not how I want my product represented." And this would be the second meet that it would be introduced at. The first meet was over the summer at Byron's gym. It was a UPA meet that I had two mounted there, and Byron allowed me to introduce it to the powerlifting community there. And so this would be the second meet that it's at. And it's like, no, I don't want it cracked. I don't want, and shipping problems happen. And so, I flew out there. The Thursday before the Records Breaker meet, I was in his gym fixing the one because and the meet was on Saturday. And it was just like, no, this is my name. This is my product. This is something I passionately built, and I don't want it represented any other way besides the proper way. Jesse allowed me to stay for over the weekend, and it was a very, very good turnout, a very positive feedback about, wow, what is this? And that was just a cool thing, was seeing people get excited about what I've been working on since April, basically.
There's going to be a lot of smaller forearms now. There's nothing worse.
Yes. Yes.
The only direct arm work I ever got was rolling wraps, and it's horrible.
Yes.
If ever a powerlifting coach and you're handling more than one lifter, oh my God! By the end of the day, your arms are just dead. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I so the 2 weekends ago was the Records Breakers meet, and then last weekend I was out in Iowa. And I live in northern Illinois, so I drove out to Iowa for a UPA meet out there, and I was out there for the weekend promoting it. And that was the thing is I shared on my Instagram, there was a picture of a coach, of a guy. He had 2 wraps over his shoulders, and then he was rolling another set of wraps. So he was helping multiple athletes, and I mean, he was constantly coming back, and I asked him, it's just kind of, what do you think? And he was just like, man, this is saving me a lot, and it's just, that's the awesome thing, and that's what it's made for. It's being an athlete myself, being a powerlifter myself, I never even had the hand cranked one. I always did it where you stepped on it, you pulled it up nice and tight, and then you rolled it down, and it was inconsistent all the time. Each knee felt different all the time. You know, there was never consistency in the rep. Now it's 100% consistency. Either somebody's ma or girlfriend who doesn't even power lift, who came over to start helping roll, you know, the athlete's reps. And, you know, and she even told me, she says, I've never done this before. I've never been able to do this. And that just right there was like awesome. I'm glad everybody can use it. It's simple and easy enough to where, like you said, your forearms aren't now getting blitzed where, you know, you're walking around like Popeye after a meet and you're lifting the next day. You've helped your athletes out, and now it's your turn the next day, and you wake up and your fingertips are now raw, and you're like, okay, great. Well, my third attempt deadlift is supposed to be a PR for me. How am I going to get there? It's definitely changing, I believe, and it's also changing how your reps affect your lifts. The athletes have told me they've been able to get 2 more revelations out of their reps. They're stretched so well that they can get 2 more, you know, extra lengths out of it. Well, now that changes how you can wrap your knees almost. You know, that changes the pressure on your knee. That changes your PR even.
No, thanks for doing this. Where can people find it again? Go ahead and shoot those websites out there. Instagram,
the website is automaticraproller.com. My Instagram is the same thing, automatic rap roller, and it's all one. It's just automatic rap, WRAP, roller, ROLLER. You can find me on Instagram, and then even, you know, the website. Just check it out. Shoot me messages. I'm gonna try to go to one more meet this year. And promote it more out there. But, you know, if you have a chance, if it's in a gym near you, I've got a handful of them out there right now. So they're kind of spread throughout the U.S. a little bit. But definitely check it out and get a hold of me.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. No problem.
Okay, everyone, we'll catch up with you next week. There's some holiday listening for you.
There you go.
See you guys.
Yep.
Thank you for the opportunity, guys. I really do appreciate it.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the store, so we try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, you know is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org. And let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So, thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers,
and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.